And if you buy Vampire Planet, you also get a copy of Indigo, so it's 2 books for one. And all the money that you give my wife, who has change, I'll give to Phil. That will go to Jackson. I have a playlist, like a musician. And I have some new poems. I always read a few new poems because my wife is with me and she's heard me read a lot and can still drive at night. So it can't have been that deleterious. I write a very easygoing poem, a very loose line. I almost never work in forms. I have a couple, but they're not typical. I might read you one about the Hardy Boys. I never quite know what I'm going to read, and I like to see what kind of people you are. Sometimes people like just really the bawdy stuff, and sometimes they like the serious stuff. But I'm going to start with this. It answers the question, what kind of poems do you write? And the title is Since You Asked, and the poem itself is the answer. Since you ask, I'd say my style is conversational or maybe loquacious, like someone trying to pledge a good sorority, someone who can't stop talking about her stuffed animals. Still, I bet there's plenty of what people call hidden meaning in my work. Not that I know. Robert Frost's poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, is supposed to be about death, but why couldn't it be about weather? Or real estate? I'm terrible at ferreting out meanings, though I admire people who can lean into a sonnet with their stethoscopes and then deliver the news with the same grave expression as physicians. For the kind of poems I'm writing now, I'm glad I wasn't born in Japan. I can see my haiku master fanning himself as I count the syllables and say, 210, and that's just the first stanza. No, I'm an American, and a long-winded American at that. I just go on like one of those blue highways through Montana with an occasional joke or simile like a roadside attraction. Other poets tug on the reins and pause in the dark. Inside their mittens, they count perfect iams. They think deep thoughts while the snow fills the ruts their sleigh left and collects on the brims of their somber hats. This little poem, skinny as you can see, called What She Wanted. I just hope you've all been so crazy about someone, a man or a woman, and what does it matter, that you made an utter fool out of yourself. Just degraded, made fun of, spent money and went nowhere. I remember driving by the house of a woman that I was crazy for, and just at night to see if her car was there. Have you done this? Great. Good. Then you'll like this poem. And worse, if her car wasn't there, it made me more crazy, and if a different car was there, it was worse, and God forbid, a motorcycle. What she wanted was my bones. And as I gave them to her one at a time, she put them in a bag from Saks Fifth Avenue. If I didn't hesitate, as long as I didn't hesitate, she collected scapula and vertebrae with a smile. If I grew reluctant, she pouted. And then I'd come across with a rib cage or a pelvis. Eventually, I lay in a puddle at her feet, only the boneless penis waving like an anemone. Now look what you've done, she said. That's disgusting. Delicious. It's so cool. I read a lot of fairy tale character poems, and I'll read you a fast one about Jack of Jack and the Beanstalk. At a very fast moving poem that never worked, and so I slowed it down. Jack is the speaker here. He's the narrator. And if you remember the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, there's the gold, there's the magic hen, and there's the harp, right? That helps. This is Jack, title, and this is what he says. After that dead giant gets hauled away, it's just mother and me and the gold. I buy some new clothes, drop in at the pub, girls sit on my lap and tell me I'm handsome, and then I pick up the tab. Strangers stop me with the saddest stories I've ever heard, but I can't give everybody a golden egg. She might be a magic hen, but she's just a hen. So I get the cold shoulder and graffiti on the new fence. Up your beanstalk, it says. And it isn't just a fence, it's a wall, which I need because of the robberies. Last week, somebody snatched the harp. Master, master, it cried. And I jumped out of bed, got off a shot or two, and whoever it was fled empty-handed. I used to be a thief in that world above the clouds. The giant's wife hid me and coddled me. And now look, I'm a fat man in silk pajamas holding a gun. Jack. I was raised my mother would say reared because she had aspirations of class. But I was raised in the Midwest in a little town maybe 20 miles across the river from St. Louis, but I'm into Illinois. So I was subjected to the kind of religion that you only get in the Midwest and in Southern Illinois. And this means revival meetings, snake handling, you know the snakes? I mean, just hardcore stuff. So I read the Bible a lot. I still know a lot about it. And I'll read you this poem called Teen Jesus. And then another one. Where is that poem? Oh, I'll read you. Oh, here it is. So this is first. The poem explains this, but Jesus is a baby, and it's famous, and it's Bethlehem. We know the story. And then there's all this big gap of time until he's in his 30s, and he's doing his father's business. I tried to imagine what he would do as a boy. There are a few apocryphal stories about Jesus as a child, how he walked up a sunbeam and flabbergasted his playmates, how his bathwater could cure any illness. But there are no stories about him as a teenager. Did he make his bed without being told? Or was he the kind of scamp who jumped out from behind bushes, scaring girls on their way to the well? Did his mother nag him about outgrowing his robes and sandals? And when she was frustrated, did she ever say to him, Jesus? Jesus, do you think your father and I are made out of myrrh? He was probably a cool kid, one the others looked up to. And it wasn't only that he said he wouldn't live very long. A lot of the guys said that, especially the ones who drank too much wine and raced their donkeys. But Jesus was different. While everybody else partied by the Dead Sea, he'd take a rowboat out, step right off the bow, and sink like a stone. And then he'd swim back in all mad. His pals could tease him out of a bad mood, though, and pretty soon he'd change water into beer and make one hot dog feed everybody. Girls liked him, but he wasn't into them, though no way was he like Obadiah, who made his own curtains. Nobody was surprised when he left home, and a few of his friends almost tagged along, but they couldn't resist Esther's long hair pulled back and fastened with an amber pin. They couldn't resist the pale underside of Miriam's wrist. They got married and never went more than 5 miles from Nazareth. Thank you, Christian Zoll. That poem is about what it says it's about, but it's about my hometown, the boys and girls and kids I went to school with. They stayed in Collinsville. And probably the last poem I'll read tonight explains how and why I left Collinsville. Here's a kind of a companion poem, I guess. Not about religion, but about dying, about the well, not the afterlife, just about dying. I was ill a few years ago, seriously enough that without modern medicine I would have died. And I'm almost never sick, and it scared the crap out of me. So when I got well, I decided I would write about it, of course, but I thought I would make friends with death because I was so afraid of dying. So I wrote a series of poems about death in different guises, and this is the one that I liked the most and that I put into the book. The title, Death Comes Home, is, like as usual, bleeds right into the first stanza. Death comes home from a business trip. He's been gone for days. All he wants to do is sit in the bathtub with a glass of bourbon. He likes the cat to come in and peer at the water, maybe test it with one paw. Otherwise, he wants to be alone. Pretty soon he feels a little better. The cat is old, so he carries it into the kitchen. His wife has sent the children to her mother's. She asks, "How was it today, honey?" And he says, "Awful." And she says, "Poor baby. Well, I'm making cornbread." He watches her fill a square pan and slip it into the oven with such tenderness that he whimpers a little. Cornbread and beans. If he could die, and if he had a last request, that's what he'd ask for. You guys like funny stuff. I don't blame you. This poem's called Reading to the Bland. I like to fiddle around with cliches, a stitch in time, blah, 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 blah. And I saw this as a misprint for Reading to the Blind, of course. So if you have a mind like I have, then you start to wonder what you can do with a poem called Reading to the Bland. And these are all the things that are prohibited if you are a reader to the bland. No stories about horses with thundering hooves, nothing about fire, no ships that flounder in heavy seas making people scream, no mighty empires in decline, no enormous ants, no one filled with dread, no nothingness, no ungainly shapes even if they're shy, nothing about wolves, gaunt or otherwise, no barbaric jewelry on slender wrists, nothing about scars or elaborate tattoos, no corpses, no orphans, no ghosts, no sirens, no NPR, no hats, no earthquakes, nothing big, nothing hairy, absolutely nothing big and hairy. No stained upholstery, nothing about bottomless wells, no atomic geese, no clank of hidden machinery, no one who's been asleep for years, no bulldozers, no cauldrons, no bullwhips or barbed wire shoes, nothing about tombs or flammable pajamas, no goats wearing suicide vests, no hacksaws, no vans with deeply tinted windows, no one invisible but still wearing gloves, no instant coffee that takes forever, no hoarsely whispered admonitions, nothing about the tongue ever. And these are the guidelines for our volunteers. Please leave your shoes at the door. I was in an elevator with Tiger Woods once in Las Vegas, years ago at the peak of his fame and prowess. And we were going down, obviously, and he stepped in, and the place just, the elevator just went quiet. No one knew what to do. No one could speak to him. He's just stone-faced, bigger than you'd imagine. Big guy, big arms and stuff. I wanted to write about it, not particularly about Tiger Woods, but I wanted to write about that experience, the iconicness of it all. So I put him aside, and I settled on Elvis. But it's called Truck Stop. When Elvis walked through the door, the whole place got so quiet. That jumpsuit was whiter than the laundry on television. He had that little sneer, but it wasn't snooty, just cute. He said he liked stopping at real places on his way to a concert. He said concerts were fun, but they weren't real. The waitress told him, "Don't have the pie, honey, it's from yesterday." He paid for everybody's meal, and before he left, he sang Mystery Train. After he left, no one could finish what they'd ordered and had wanted so badly. They couldn't look at each other, just maybe deep inside themselves. Then a new customer barged in and ruined everything. His voice was like a chainsaw. And at that point, a woman or two started to cry. A poem about the big bad wolf. I write I know most of you are writers, I know many of you are. I go through so many drafts, I throw away so many mistakes and problems, things that just don't work out. This finally worked out with lines that all begin with the same word, he, the same pronoun. It worked its way down the page. And you'll see. It's called He Doesn't Want Her That Way, the Forest, the Grandmother's House, etc. He doesn't want to emerge from behind a tree. He doesn't want to compliment her outfit. He doesn't want to hear the reserve in her voice. He decides to be daring. He asks if she wants to see his lair. He bites his tongue, corrects himself. Apartment. He watches her handle his mementos. He answers questions about the photos of his parents. He takes her riding hood. He brushes off nettles with his tail and hangs it up. And he agrees to do that part again for her, the brushing part. He likes the way she sprawls in his favorite chair. He excuses himself to look up Stockholm Syndrome. He finds it takes longer than an afternoon. He throws himself at her feet. He feels her hand in his fur probing for muscles. He's glad he went on that diet. He hears it start to rain. He puts some more wood on the fire. He helps her take off those little black shoes. It was so eerie that when I wrote it, I thought, holy crap, Ronnie. Don't you do that? You finish something, you don't know where it comes from, and you're just so grateful. Another poem built on a cliche. This cliche is Rome wasn't built in a day. And I'll read the title again because it, as usual, goes into the first line. Rome wasn't built in a day. It took a day and a half. We worked our butts off. Overtime was nice, but man, we were too wrecked to enjoy what we'd done. It wasn't like Antioch or Ithaca. Those we did before noon. Took a break about 10, looked out at the people waiting for us to finish their city. When we hammered the last nail, they rushed in, claimed the apartments. They got places along a main street where a barber or a blacksmith could make a living. And pretty soon the women started cooking. They stepped outside and called their kids in for dinner. The little ones waddled toward home, most of them pulling some silly toy on a string. And that's the part I love after a hard day. But just a day, one, not like Rome. What a bitch that was. I'll read you the Sestina and then the last poem. How's that, Phil? Good? Excellent. Phil's timing me. This Sestina is about the Hardy Boys. And the Sestina, as you know, as many of you know, is really hard. And they're usually sterile exercises. All the poets try them, and they don't turn out very well. And you think, well, I've just chosen the wrong keywords. And you go back and you change them. It doesn't help very much. It's still a sterile exercise. This one of the many that I wrote turned out okay. And we all know who the Hardy Boys are, right? Yeah, I mean, you guys are, you're not as old as I am, but you've been around. So you know the Hardy Boys, you know, not a mystery. You can't read this to kids, you know, it's like, duh. So, and here's, if you want to play along, here are the key words. Hometown or town, sleuthing, girls, mystery, door, and shadow. And there's some puns along the way, because that's what makes it fun. And it's called A New Hardy Boys Mystery. We're in Bayport, the boys' hometown. Dark, frank, fair Joe, sleuthing is everything. Who cares about girls? First and foremost, the mystery. Flickering torches, marks on a door, a hooded hawk, a crimson shadow. Night sounds, shades drawn, shadows fall across their hometown. Average citizens bolt their doors, but nothing keeps the boys from sleuthing. They're hot for the mystery. They can't be bothered with girls, though Frank has noticed girls wearing lipstick and eyeshadow, decked out in skimpy mysteries lighting up his hometown, getting in the way of his sleuthing. He doesn't want to go through that door. Thank God, another riddle to a door. Now they can stop thinking about girls. Okay, when they're through sleuthing, maybe it gets a little old, shadowing bad guys all over their charming hometown, solving every single mystery. There are other kinds of mysteries like Ava and Emma sunning next door, and suddenly it's like their hometown is boiling over with girls coming boldly out of the shadows, teasing them about their sleuthing. Ava and Emma take over sleuthing, guiding them toward a different mystery, leading them into the shadows, turning out lights, locking a door, telling them not to think of other girls, much less their stupid hometown. Joe and Frank are stymied. Are these beautiful hometown girls shadowy doors leading to mysteries that no amount of sleuthing can ever solve?